You know this story. The Roman governor who ordered the crucifixion of Jesus, the man with absolute power over Judea, who chose political convenience over justice, the villain whose name is spoken every time the Nicene Creed is recited, suffered under Pontius Pilate, forever attached to the central act of violence in Christian history. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, the man history made synonymous with the crucifixion. You know it like this. Jesus is brought before Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. Pilate has the absolute power to release or condemn him. He chooses to crucify Jesus, either out of cruelty, cowardice, or to please the crowd. He is the man who ordered the most consequential execution in human history. Now let me tell you what all four canonical Gospels actually record about what Pilate did, said, and tried to do before that crucifixion happened. He tried 3 times to release Jesus. He found no legal basis for execution. He washed his hands in front of the crowd and said, "I am innocent of this man's blood." The decision was not his to make freely, and the system that made it for him is the part of this story almost nobody tells. Pontius Pilate was the Roman prefect of Judea from approximately 26 to 36 CE. This is not disputed history. We have external confirmation beyond the Gospels. The Pilate stone, discovered at Caesarea Maritima in 1961, is a limestone inscription bearing his name and title, definitively confirming his historical existence and position. The Jewish historian Josephus and the Roman historian Tacitus both describe him independently, and the picture that emerges from these sources is not of a hesitant or merciful administrator. Josephus records that Pilate had brought Roman military standards bearing the emperor's image into Jerusalem, a deliberate provocation of Jewish religious sensibilities about graven images. He had used temple funds to build an aqueduct, provoking riots which he suppressed with violence, having soldiers beat protesters with clubs. He had ordered the execution of Samaritan pilgrims on a charge that was likely fabricated. This is the historical Pilate outside the Gospels, a Roman administrator capable of real brutality, willing to use force against Jewish religious sensitivities, not someone the historical record suggests was naturally inclined toward mercy or hesitation. Which makes what happens in the Gospel accounts of Jesus' trial considerably more significant. All 4 canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, record Pilate attempting to avoid condemning Jesus. The details vary between accounts, but the core pattern is consistent across all 4 independent sources. In Luke's Gospel, Pilate states explicitly to the religious authorities and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." When this does not satisfy them, he attempts to transfer responsibility. Discovering Jesus is from Galilee, he sends him to Herod Antipas, who governed that region, hoping to avoid the decision entirely. Herod questions Jesus and sends him back to Pilate, uncondemned. Pilate tries again. He proposes the custom of releasing one prisoner for the Passover festival. He offers the crowd a choice between Jesus and Barabbas, a man the Gospels describe as an insurrectionist and murderer. He clearly expects the crowd to choose Jesus. They choose Barabbas. In Matthew's Gospel, Pilate's wife sends him a message during the proceedings. Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of a dream about him today." Pilate, according to Matthew, then takes water and washes his hands in front of the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." 3 attempts to release him. A wife's warning. A public declaration of innocence. This is what the text says happened before the crucifixion. If Pilate found no legal basis for a charge, if he believed Jesus was innocent, why did he ultimately order the crucifixion anyway? John's Gospel records the specific pressure applied. The religious authorities tell Pilate, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." This was not an abstract threat. Pilate served at the pleasure of Emperor Tiberius. His position in Judea was already precarious. He had a documented history of provoking unrest that had drawn negative attention from Rome. The historian Josephus's accounts of the Standards Incident and the Aqueduct riots suggest that complaints about Pilate's administration had already reached imperial attention. A formal accusation that Pilate had released a man claiming kingship, a direct challenge to Roman imperial authority, could end his career, or worse. In the Roman administrative system, a charge of maiestas, treason against the emperor, was taken with absolute seriousness. Pilate was caught between 2 systems of accountability: his own judgment that Jesus had committed no crime worthy of death, and the political reality that releasing him carried a personal risk that could end his career or his life. He chose his career. This does not make him innocent. The man who could order soldiers to beat protesters with clubs over an aqueduct did not lack the capacity for cruelty, but the text's specific and repeated record of his reluctance is not incidental detail. It is structurally central to all 4 accounts. The trial of Jesus, as the Gospels record it, involved multiple layers of authority, each one shifting responsibility. The religious authorities brought Jesus to Pilate because, under Roman occupation, the Sanhedrin did not have the legal authority to carry out capital punishment. Only Rome could authorize an execution. Pilate attempted to transfer the decision to Herod. Herod sent it back. Pilate attempted to use the crowd's choice through the Passover pardon custom. The crowd chose Barabbas. At every stage, the individual with formal authority attempted to avoid being the one who made the final decision. And at every stage, the decision was pushed back to him, until the political cost of refusing became, in his calculation, higher than the cost of complying. This is not unique to Pilate's story. It is one of the oldest patterns in institutional power, a decision that everyone involved would prefer not to own, distributed across enough layers of process that no single person experiences themselves as the one who decided it. The Gospels, written by communities that had every theological reason to assign blame somewhere, assign a significant portion of it to the religious authorities who initiated the proceedings, and to a crowd whose composition and motives the texts describe with care. They show Pilate as reluctant, pressured, and ultimately complicit through inaction rather than initiative. The Nicene Creed, Formulated in 325 CE, the foundational statement of Christian belief recited in churches for 17 centuries contains the phrase, "crucified under Pontius Pilate." This phrase was included for a specific historical reason, to anchor the crucifixion to a verifiable point in Roman history, using a known Roman official's term of office as a historical marker. It was not originally intended primarily as an assignment of blame. But across centuries of Christian tradition, Pilate's name became permanently and primarily associated with guilt. Dante placed him in the vestibule of hell. Christian art for 1,000 years depicted him as a villain, often a grotesque one. The hand-washing gesture, recorded by Matthew as Pilate's declaration of innocence, became, ironically, cultural shorthand for cowardly evasion of responsibility, rather than what the text presents it as. Meanwhile, the religious and political authorities whose pressure the Gospels describe in detail, and the systemic structure of Roman occupation that removed any legal path to release, received considerably less attention in the popular tradition that formed around the story. Some early Christian traditions, particularly in the Coptic Orthodox and Ethiopian Orthodox churches, actually venerate Pilate as a saint based on traditions of his eventual conversion and on a reading of the gospel accounts that emphasizes his attempts to release Jesus. This minority tradition has existed for over 1,000 years, almost entirely unknown outside specific Eastern Christian communities. The story of Pontius Pilate has been told for nearly 2,000 years as the story of the man who crucified Jesus, the Roman governor with absolute power who chose expedience over justice. The gospel accounts, the very texts that record his role in the crucifixion, also record, in detail, across all 4 independent sources, that he tried 3 times to avoid it, found no legal basis for the charge, and was moved by a political threat specifically calibrated to his personal vulnerability. This does not erase his responsibility. He held the formal authority. He made the final decision. A man with more courage might have accepted the risk to his career and released a prisoner he believed was innocent. But the story of Pilate is also the story of how a decision gets made by a system in which everyone involved has plausible grounds to say it was not really them. The authorities who could not execute, the governor who could not afford the political cost of refusing. The crowd offered a choice engineered to produce a specific outcome. History needed a face for the decision. It put Pilate's name in the creed, his image in the paintings, his gesture in the language. The system that actually produced the outcome, distributed, layered, each part deniable, left no name behind at all. He found no basis for a charge. He tried 3 times to release him. He washed his hands in front of the crowd, and history remembers the hands, not the water. Every wall holds a story. Some walls were built by a decision nobody wanted to own.